Namaste and very good evening to all of you. I'm really delighted to be here amongst you all, and I want to especially thank Dr. Vineet Gupta for inviting me to be part of your seminar series, Friday seminar series, as I understand. So I'm really glad I could, the timings and everything worked out. And of course, a little bit that I caught of the previous presentation and the small demonstration that he led us through, Dr. Sadbir Khalsa ji, that was really very nice, very relaxing, and kind of it made me ready to launch into my presentation as well. So if it's all right with you, with your um, permission, I can go ahead and start my presentation.
Please do, ma'am.
Yes. Okay. So as Dr. Vineet said, that I come from Sri Aurobindo Society, and yes, most of my work in the last, I guess over the last 15, 20 years has been to look at how Sri Aurobindo's insights can be applicable in all domains of activity, in all domains of human life. Though Sri Aurobindo, as most of you I'm sure are aware, his work is so vast. He's such an integral philosopher, thinker, and visionary that no aspect of human life and no domain of human activity has been left untouched by his vision and by his way of looking at existence and what that means for future of human evolution, future of human consciousness, evolutionary march of human consciousness, both at the individual level and as well as at the collective level. So my background prior to coming to Sri Aurobindo's work was in the field of economics and education. So naturally, my entry into Sri Aurobindo's integral vision was also through those disciplines of social sciences. When I was teaching there in the US, it was courses in academic curriculum design and academic research, qualitative research. And with my background in economics, I was also drawn to his social philosophy, social evolutionary vision of what human collective life would be. So naturally, it fits in that, on the side, with this background, I have been interested a little bit in terms of, besides his writings on Indian culture and integral yoga, living, practicing whatever little drop of the vast teachings that Sri Aurobindo has left us with. And of course, his philosophical vision and his poetry. Along with that, I've been also interested in the application of this vision into practical, what we ordinarily look at as practical domains of human life, which is where the business, management, and leadership, of course, in educational leadership as well, those things are concerned. So given the short period of time that we have, I've culled out few basic insights from the vast vision of Sri Aurobindo and the mother, who was his spiritual collaborator. So I'm going to just straight away jump into that. And Vineet ji, you please let me know if this is not visible for any reason.
It is visible, ma'am. You can have full screen.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So as Vineet ji said, this is Yogic Insights for Business Managers and Leaders. And with my obeisance and my pranams to my gurus, Sri Aurobindo and the mother, I begin. And on the top right-hand side, my right-hand side, are the two symbols of the mother and Sri Aurobindo. And why I've put that is that even through these symbols, we can get a good idea of what kind of yogic vision that Sri Aurobindo and mother have had. But I may not have time to go into that, but I will briefly allude to mother symbol, which is the circular one that you see on the top. So Sri Aurobindo is, most people who know even a little bit of Sri Aurobindo's yogic vision, they know this one famous line, all life is yoga. Though it doesn't appear exactly in that sense, all life is yoga. All life, the way we live our ordinary life is not yoga unless we make it through our conscious attitude, through our yogic attitude into a yogic endeavor, into a yogic aspiration, a yogic effort. But I want to start off with a small quote from a letter that Sri Aurobindo had written in April 1920 to his brother, Barin, who was also a revolutionary during India's freedom movement. And he was also, he was actually exiled to Andaman and Nicobar. But anyway, that's a matter of history. So in that letter, which is a wonderful letter on various levels because we get insights on various aspects, but there is one part where he, as Sri Aurobindo was describing what is the yoga that he is practicing and with what aim and objective and vision, and what he believes would the future of yoga would be moving forward as humanity moves forward. So there he writes about that our business is not with the formless spirit only. So typically yoga is understood as a way to connect with some transcendent higher energy. But Sri Aurobindo says, again, this is very interesting because it is in the line of the Vedic rishis, where rishis were not only concerned about connecting or uniting with the formless spirit, but also bringing the power, the force, the light, the knowledge, the wisdom from that spirit, from the higher realms to directing life as well. So we have to direct life as well, Sri Aurobindo writes. And form is important. Business, politics, trade, social organization, art, sculpture, literature, poetry, all of these are nothing but forms. So there is, when you look at his integral philosophy, you look at how spirit descends into these various forms that mind creates, that life creates. All those aspects of life and mind's creation are just as true and real as the spirit is real. So we have to be concerned about the forms as well. And that's where he continues in the letter. I've just skipped several lines there. And he talks about that in my vision of yoga, we are not excluding any of the world's activities, whether it is politics, trade, social organization, poetry, art, all are going to be integrated into this yogic vision, yogic practice, but all will be given a new form. So it's not life as is or mind's activity as they are, which are happening with a lot of mixture of falsehood and ignorance and avidya, as Indian philosophy calls it. But all have to be given a new form by applying conscious yogic aspiration to the attitude with which all of these activities are done. So this is where we begin to get a sense of how Sri Aurobindo's vision can be very much applicable to all aspects of life, including business management, including leadership in whatever domains of activity. And in fact, one of the very first chapters in his major yogic treatises that he writes, The Synthesis of Yoga, which is a grand synthesis of Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Raj Yoga, and his own vision of yoga of self-perfection, which makes it integral. In the very first chapter, he writes about that we are living in a time which demands that yoga, which had at one point of time retreated into the recluses' ascetic retreats or caves of the recluses, it has to be brought back into domain of life and mind so that it becomes one of the living human powers with grand utility for future march of humanity. So what is the relevance of yoga? Right there in his vision, yoga is relevant because yoga is all about taking life to its next potential. In that sense, all the practices come in. Now, once, as I mentioned, the mother, Mira Alfasa, who was his spiritual collaborator, once a child had asked her, what is yoga? And she just drew a very simple diagram, a sketch, which gives us a perfect definition of yoga. So she drew these zigzag lines. Right at the bottom, she drew a little circle, and at top at a small square, and then she drew zigzag lines connecting them. So the bottom is human, she said. and on the top is divine. Whatever name you want to give to the divine, or you don't want to give a name to the divine, call it nameless, call it formless, don't call it anything, just have a sense of what that divinity is, whatever the highest perfection that you can conceive of. Throughout our lifetimes, there is a zigzag movement going on, connecting human to divine. What yoga does is make this zigzag process shortened, compressed, which is also what Swami Vivekananda said, and connects human to divine through a straight line. So that straight line represents yoga. So the straight movement of human experience to the divinity within, divinity in cosmos at the universal level, and divinity that transcends the universal. So there are three poises of the divinity in that sense. Divinity or the perfection within, the divinity at the universal level, at the cosmic level, and the divinity at the transcendent level, which in our tradition is called as indescribable, anirvachaniya. So with this understanding of yoga, why it's important is, this is where Sri Aurobindo describes that all life is either consciously or subconsciously a yoga. Even if we are not aware of the word yoga, life subconsciously, nature subconsciously is leading us on the path which will connect the human in me to the divinity within me. That journey can be a very long journey over multiple lifetimes. But by making it conscious, we can compress or shorten that journey. And this is where I said the implications or the application, the practical part would come in. This is the mother symbol. And I'm just going to briefly refer to this because I want to just make a point here that even by meditating on something like this symbol, in integral yoga vision, in Sri Aurobindo's yoga vision, we can become gradually self-aware of how we are progressing on the path. So the center circle is the Aditi, the universal divine mother, the transcendent Adi Shakti, whatever we want to call it. The four petals around that center point represent the four aspects or the four main powers of the divine Shakti. They are given four different names. From an Indian tradition, the four names would be Maheshwari, Mahakali, Mahalakshmi, and Mahasaraswati. The English versions also Sri Aurobindo gave would be wisdom, strength, love and harmony, and perfection in detail, perfection in execution. So very practical terms. And the outer circle of 12 petals represent 12 qualities, soul values that we must cultivate within us so that we become ready for the kind of work that is required to progress inwardly on the path of yoga. So it can start with, generally it starts with sincerity, humility, gratitude, perseverance, aspiration. And so much has been discussed in Sri Aurobindo's and particularly in Mother's writings on the application and living of these values. What does it mean to live the value of goodness? It's not just a simple mental, ethical value of what is right, what is wrong, but there are such subtle understandings of this. The value of equality is one of the most difficult one because typically it is understood as, a social or political equality. But here, it's even takes you beyond the idea of equanimity, which Gita speaks of, Bhagavad Gita speaks of, but it's a very samatvam that we must cultivate towards work, towards life, and all these things. So just very briefly, I wanted to touch that even by meditating on this symbol, we get lots of insights in terms of soul values that we must cultivate in our approach to an inner practice of yoga. But making it more applicable to our present context, which is the future or the current business students and business managers and leaders in the world of business. One line that I believe should be very relevant is, what Sri Aurobindo wrote in one of his own letters to a disciple about the spirit in which a thing is done. And here, like Sri Krishna gives his own example to Arjuna about how he's constantly working, constantly acting, even though he doesn't need to, we get a very beautiful illustration by Sri Aurobindo also, where he talks about his own example, that how any work can be done in the spirit of yoga. He says, and this question by the disciple was very much about, can a business be done honestly? Can a business be done in a yogic attitude? And Sri Aurobindo's reply, I've taken only one part of it, which is most relevant, where he talks about, I do not regard business as something evil or tainted, any more than it was so regarded in ancient spiritual India. He gives a very long example, explanation of Sri Krishna's acceptance of the Vaishya Dharma, like any of the other Chatur Dharmas, the Chaturvarna Dharmas that are there. But the key passage for our interest right now is 3 words. All depends on the spirit in which a thing is done, the principle on which it is built, and the use to which it is turned. So spirit, principle, use. And then comes his own example. I have done politics, and the most violent kind of revolutionary politics. Ghoram karma, he called it. And I have supported war and sent men to it, even though politics is not always or often a very clean occupation, nor can war be called a spiritual line of action. So those of you who are familiar with Sri Aurobindo's biography, you know about the Ghoram Karma that he talks about the revolutionary politics that he was a part of. He was the first voice in India to speak, to ask for complete Purna Swaraj, much before it became slogan. He had a 5-point program which involved Swadeshi, boycott, national education, national arbitration court, and everything else. So, and why he's saying I've supported war and sent men to it, particularly in the Second World War, we know he was very much supportive of the Allied forces. He even not only practically he supported, through the ashram itself, but also he applied his spiritual force to determine some of the major turning points in World War II. So why war can also, if war can also become part of a spiritual line of action, which is what we have in the Indian tradition, the example of Kurukshetra, which is Kurukshetra Dharma Kshetra. When Kurukshetra can become a Dharma Kshetra, business can easily become a Dharma Kshetra also. So all depends on the spirit, the principle on which it is built, and the use to which it is turned. But there are some cautions also. And I've pulled this out from his social vision, social philosophical vision, where he warns about the trends of the day. And this was again written more than 100 years ago, so somewhere in 1916. But this is very prophetic, because what he could visualize then is actually become more of a reality today. And he cautioned about 2 trends where business can go on the wrong path, leading to economic barbarism and commercialism. But this has nothing to do with business as an entity as such. This has more to do with human nature. So you cannot understand Sri Aurobindo's integral yogic vision without understanding his vision of human psychology, his integral vision of the parts of human being that we are. We are not one coherent, integrated being. We have different parts within us. And yogic tradition speaks of these as, the koshas, the pranamaya kosha, the vital sheath, the manomaya kosha, which is the mental sheath, and so on, and the annamaya kosha, the physical sheath. But even within these sheaths, within these parts of what Sri Aurobindo speaks of as matter, life, and mind, matter being the physical, the annamaya kosha, even within that, there are gradations. And there is a lot of intermixing happening. And primarily the domains of business and management or human relationships, all these deal with the vital and mind parts of within us. So the dangers, if these parts remain unpurified, unregenerated, under the influence of what in Indian tradition is known as avidya, which is basically a complex of the egoistic movements within us, these tendencies of economic barbarism and commercialism can become big threats on the way of human progress. And he defined economic barbarism as that state of being, essentially that of the vital mind. Vital is the life plane, the life energy, the pranamaya part in us, essentially where we believe that only the vital part in us is the true me, the true being within us, true self within me, and accepts the satisfaction of the vital desires as the only aim of life. And the characteristic movement of life plane is desire, possession, instinct of possession. This is the tendency in human nature that takes you to, when it remains unchecked, it can create a situation of what Sri Aurobindo calls as economic barbarism, which makes the satisfaction of wants and desires and accumulation of possessions as the only standard and aim. And the second trend is the commercialism, where every kind of human activity gets reduced to what does it bring for me? What does it bring for my organization? So when life becomes devoid of beauty and nobility, even religion, politics, education, government, everything is turned into a trade and profession. Enjoyment itself made a business. I don't have to say anything. You people work with youngsters all the time. Everything has become a business. The social media influencers and all of that. These are the examples or symptoms of a commercial age, an age that is full of economic barbarism where we are living in. And these are the kind of the dangers that he cautioned against, while saying that even business can be done in a yogic spirit. If we don't do it, these are the dangers that can possibly happen. And we know this from our ordinary observations of life and world around us, that this is truly happening. So what are some of the, with this background, what are some of the yogic attitude that can be brought into our approach to looking at business, which can be then imparted to our students in business institutions, leadership institutions? So again, this can be a very long discussion. I pulled out only 5, but even from these 5 domains, I'm going to only focus on the first 2. Work, yogic attitudes towards work, towards money, and the other 3 things, I'll just leave it out there: success, harmony, and aim of life, because there is a very deep understanding towards those aspects as well. Now, in terms of work, Bhagavad Gita gives us a lot of insight into, karmanyevadhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachan and things like that. Work done without desire, work done without any attachment to any reward, without any egoistic attitude, and work done as an offering to the highest, to the divine, as a yagna. We give our ahuti in the yagna that is going on. That becomes work. But so this becomes a path of self-giving. We give ourselves. The mother said work is as if the body is praying. We generally pray with our mind and our heart, but work is prayer through the body, through whatever work we do. Even when we do mental work, our physical is involved. So, but all these seem very grand things. So I have pulled out few specific points. But again, they sound easy, though they are not that easy to practice. So let me start with number 1. Number 1 is how to apply or how to walk on this path of giving our work, giving ourselves through our work. The first point I'm sharing today is to be ready to do any work that is needed, not only the work that not only the work that I prefer. And I've given the references. These are all from Sri Aurobindo's or mother's letters or conversations with disciples who are, because Sri Aurobindo ashram, if you know, it's a very Karma Yogis ashram. Everyone in the ashram or ashram connected institution is engaged in some kind of work. So a lot of conversations and letters happened regarding the right attitude towards work. How difficult it is to do any kind of work that is being asked of us, not only the kind of work that I prefer. This requires a yogic practice of giving up my attachment or my preference to only I can do this kind of work. We don't know what we are capable of. Yoga itself, Swami Vivekananda said, is a means of psychological perfection to bring out the hidden potentialities within us. But even otherwise, I like to do only mental work. I don't like to clean the house. I don't like to cook, or I like to do only physical work. I don't like to read or apply my mind to solve a problem. Yogic attitude, that is the samatva, the equality point that I mentioned in the mother symbol, would require us to gradually practice this readiness to do any kind of work. In an organization, it helps us build a much needed quality of obedience, but it has to start from the leadership itself. The person at the top, the leader also has to be willing to do any kind of work that is needed, not just the one that he or she prefers. Second point I want to bring to our attention is to do work as if it's not my work, it is the work of the divine. I am just as an instrument given this opportunity to offer my squirrel-like, contribution to this great yagna, this great ahuti that is taking place. Yet I do given my best capacity, best enthusiasm, highest effort, without bringing in my ambition, vanity, and passion. Passion is, this is a term a lot of youngsters use these days, follow the passion, follow the passion. But passion is also, it can lead us to a very dangerous, holes. Because passion is usually coming out as it's a movement of an unrefined vital part in us, unrefined emotional part in us. So keeping the passion out and yet giving in our best effort, keeping our ambition out, doing whatever is needed, knowing that I'm just as an instrument of doing this work. With that is connected the idea, point number 3, that what is important is the perfection of the work that is being done, rather than how big or how important it is. Am I really making a difference in the world by just doing this little work that I'm, doing in my organization? But by focusing on doing the work as perfectly as I can, I am actually purifying some part within, which is nothing but practice of yoga. And point number 4 is again something very relevant for the times we live in, because we like to announce everything what we are doing. Mother cautioned against this. When there is serious work to be done, do not speak about it. The less one speaks of it, the better it is. Again, there is a philosophical reason for that, because there is a certain field of vibrational energies in which we all operate. There is a kind of a movement of various wills around in which we work and live and interact with one another. So in order not to disturb that, the less we speak about the work, important work that is to be done, the better it is. These are some practices that we must follow if we want to do if we want to develop a yogic attitude towards work. Now, this is where it becomes very interesting, especially in the context of business organizations or any organization. So much depends on, we talk about title. What is the title of this such and such person? Who is he or she? We are introduced with our titles. But ultimately, as far as the quality of work is concerned, it's not so much the title, but the consciousness with which the work has been taken up, the force and light of the person who has offered his or her consciousness into the work that has been done. So in Mother talked about this in one of her conversations, that in the actualities of life, how powerful a person is does not depend on the title, the official title, rather the force and light of the person's inner consciousness, inner state of being. And finally, one more point that I've pulled out for our session here is, we may be doing all these things. We may do totally detached work. Let's assume we have come to that point in our attitude towards work without any idea of personal gain, work for simply the joy of working. But are we ready to leave the work also? If tomorrow the work is taken away, and if something gets disturbed within me, the yogic attitude gets thrown out the window. So a truly disinterested, dispassionate yogic attitude toward work also requires to be ready to leave the work or to change the way we are approaching the work. Right? There is a very flexible leadership inside. If we cling to our own way of working and are not open to any other insight or any other different way of looking at the work, our surrender as a yogic, as a practicing yogi or as a practicing sadhak. Yogi is a huge word. Yogi means one who is already united with the divine. But as a sadhak, as an aspirant, we are not really practicing the path. So just as we should be ready to do any work that is being asked of us, similarly, we should also be ready, because that's where the principle of equality is, samatvam. Look at this in this same, have the same attitude towards this, have the same attitudes towards this. So that's the why I focused in on just that quality. Now, in terms of attitude towards money, this is very interesting because in one of the very key texts, which is basically a compilation of 6 letters of Sri Aurobindo, where all of his philosophy and yogic practices are integrated so beautifully in these 6 letters, there is one small little letter about money. And it's very interesting why he would include that in that compilation. The book itself is called The Mother, because it's the mother, the Shakti, the divine Shakti, which is behind everything and all the movement of life and world. There he writes about money. What is money? Money is a universal force, just like even love is a universal force. And as far as this present manifestation on earth, which includes our lives, minds, individual, collective lives, all the work that we do, all that is happening in the world, life, good, bad, ugly, whatever, in this manifestation on earth, on the physical and the vital planes, which is the Annamaya and the Pranamaya planes of existence, vital plays a very important role. He says, in its manifestation on earth, works on the money as a force works on the vital and physical planes and is indispensable to the fullness of the outer life. This is straight a page from the ancient Indian vision of Purusharthas, where Artha was considered, the material well-being was considered just as important as Dharma or Kama, or eventually later on Moksha. But he's presenting it for a rational future human generation, which will want to look at things at a much, like a rational explanation of that. Now, if we understand money as a sign, as a symbol of some sort of a universal force, what are the attitudes that we should have, the right attitude towards money? And I have pulled out 3 points here. One is not to have an ascetic shrinking from the money or the means that money gives and the objects that money brings. So neither an ascetic shrinking nor a rajasic attachment to money or the power that the money brings, the means that it provides us, or the objects, the comforts that it gives us. So neither turn with an ascetic shrinking nor have a rajasic attachment towards that, because it's the rajasic attachment which makes us slave. He uses the phrase enslaving self-indulgence. So we have to stay away from that kind of enslavement to the power of money. At the same time, we need not have the ascetic shrinking from money as if it's something dirty. So this is again why it connects with his point of that business is not evil or tainted or anything like that. Business can also be made part of one's spiritual pursuit if done with the right attitude. The second point I want to bring to our attention is that if we are free from this money taint he uses in the sense which will have two kinds, either the ascetic shrinking or the rajasic attachment. That taints our attitude towards money. If we are free from that, but without any ascetic withdrawal, we will have a greater power to command the money force for the divine work. In the same letter, he talked about that money is something like other two things, which is desire for power, where the politics would come in, and desire for sex. These are three things that are can be easily abducted by the asuric forces in creation that are there in manifestation. And the work of doing business with an yogic attitude is to kind of reconquer the money and use it for the divine purpose, use it for the higher deeds, the good deeds for individual and collective life. And who will have the power to do that? The one who has these attitude, neither an ascetic withdrawal nor a rajasic attachment. That makes one free from the money taint. Because those who want to, this is point number 3, those who are only interested in being the possessors and keepers of wealth, they are actually more possessed, he said, rather than possessors of wealth. So we don't want to become possessed by the force of money. We want to possess and use it for the right kind of work, uh, with the right kind of attitude. Now, just connecting it all to what makes one a good leader, having this understanding, as I said, because of the time, I'm skipping out the other things: success, aim of life, harmony. Few pointers in terms of what makes a good leader. What are some of the insights we can get from Sri Aurobindo in that regard? And here I've pulled out something that he talked about when he wrote a beautiful sort of like an obituary at the demise of Lokmanya Tilak, and what kind of a leader he was. There we get very interesting insights as to what makes a good leader. A leader, he says, is not one who can speak very, flowery language and in a passionate way, or with a beautiful voice. He writes in a very poetic way. A leader is one who has a very clear understanding of how quickly circumstances and needs keep changing. A leader is one who has the vision and adaptability to know what exactly is to be done with this fast changing circumstances and needs. And he illustrates this with the examples in Lokmanya Tilak's, life. And having vision is great, having adaptability is good, and all that stuff. But one also has to have the will and courage to act steadily, calmly, and firmly. Steadily is very important because in my observation of life around, I see this all the time. We are very good at starting great projects, grand ideas, but we don't have the steadfastness to see through the end of it. So the 3 points that I want to bring up here is what makes a good leader? Practicing what? Thoroughness, detailed perfection, detailed execution, thinking, having a 360-degree vision, steadiness, seeing through the end of the project, and faithfulness to one's own vision. And if one needs to bring in some outer insights from experts, having faith in that vision. Focus on perfecting the work, not for one's satisfaction, but for the fact that we want to make a perfect offering to the divine. Even if it is to do some sort of a plan of action, it has to be done as perfectly as possible, because you're not feeding the ego of the CEO. And even the CEO has to have that spirit. We are doing it, we are offering it to the divine, whose work this all business is. The second point is the leader's ability to collaborate, not just because it is it's a catchy word, but do it with the yogic attitude that it is good discipline for working on our own vanity. It helps cut excessive sense of personal importance. So working with teams, it helps us forget our own likings and preferences, which is the one of the first things I mentioned in our yogic attitude towards work, to let go of our preferences and likings. So collaboration can be a great means to help us build that yogic attitude. And finally, never asking from anyone any of these virtues, whatever the virtues, having courage, having a vision, having adaptability, having right, sincerity, humility, goodness, or any of those things, if we don't have them ourselves. So this is an insight from the mother. Do not ask from others the virtues you do not possess yourself. And she said this in the context of actually, there used to be a situation with some of the gatekeepers at the ashram, the attendants, the watchmen, and even with those small examples, such perfection she asked for. So who is a true leader? A true leader is one, I just have to read his entire words. Help men who helps others, but do not pauperize them of their energy. Do not rob them of their energy. Lead and instruct men. A true leader is one who leads, instructs, but sees that their initiative and originality remain intact. Take others into thyself, having a sense of collaborative oneness, but give them in return the full Godhead of their nature. This is something in Indian organizations, there is way too much, sometimes very stringent hierarchy. It does not mean that there is no truth in hierarchy. Hierarchy is important, democracy is important. But how do we integrate the two? That's where a good leadership will come in, who takes others along with them, but gives them in return the full Godhead, allowing the full blossoming of the people working with you, working under you. He who can do this is the leader and the guru. So even the squirrel was important for Rama when the Ram Setu was being built. So help men, instruct them, lead them, but do not take away their originality and initiative. This is what a true leader would be in this integral yogic vision. And how would we select who the true leader would be, or who is to be given this charge? And there we have a very beautiful insight from the mother, where she says, she said this again in a conversation when some new people had joined the ashram. I do not give positions, I give work. And to all, I give an equal opportunity. Imagine if a company CEO or in an educational institution, I've worked in the university level, so I can say this, when our university presidents or deans will be able to say this, it is those who prove to be most capable, most sincere, honest, and faithful that have the biggest amount of work and the greatest responsibility. Sometimes I remind myself just to, kind of say that, okay, why am I doing this? Why is other person not doing, or she's not being asked to do this work? Then I say, okay, maybe because my mother has seen something in me and this work has come on my desk. So this is, in a way, by reminding ourselves of such insights, we can gradually keep cleaning our own attitude, rather than saying, oh, she's also at this position, why is she not being asked to do it? No, but maybe there is something in me that mother wants to develop, some quality in me that she wants to develop, that this work has come to me. So those who are given the highest responsibility, the greatest amount of work, maybe because they have progressed as right instruments. At least in this vision, we should begin to see things like that. So rather than selecting leaders based on seniority, number of years of service. Look at their sincerity, look at their faithfulness. How do we bring these qualities to the future business leaders, future business managers, if we don't start them in business schools, in within the organizations and in the classrooms that is being taught about, that where they are being prepared for future? And I want to end with this, that ultimately all life and work has to be seen as means for progress. And if you recall the first slide where I had mother symbol, or where I talked about the mother symbol, the central point is the divine Shakti, the Aditi, the four petals, where I said these are the four domains, the four powers of the divine Shakti that each one of us has to develop, no matter what line of work we are engaged in, but particularly for future leaders. And these four domains are knowledge, strength, harmony, and dexterity, the perfection in execution, perfection in detail. So knowledge is where the idea of having vision and wisdom would come in. Strength is developing that intelligent will and the one-pointedness that Bhagavad Gita speaks about. It's not the concentration that we can't concentrate, but it's on, how long can we keep the concentration? The one-pointedness of our concentration and our will to the object that we are trying to work on. That's the force of Mahakali. That requires a lot of strength. And finally, especially for the business and leadership, business leadership context, it's the last two powers. These are, if you think deeply, these are what in traditional Indian understanding was called as the power of Vaishyahood and Shudrahood, where Vaishya would be the one who would be creating wealth, harmony, love, joy. Everything comes because there is material well-being. Material well-being is important, but it is also about creating harmony in the society, creating harmony and beauty and nobility in the society. India never had the ideal of poverty. India always had the poverty of opulence, beautiful opulence. We see this from descriptions of Ayodhya. In Ramayana, we see this in all our traditional texts. And finally is the dexterity, the perfection in detail of work. Those who are being asked to do any work, they do it with as perfect attention to detail as they can. So those are the powers of Mahakali and Mahasaraswati. There is a psychological explanation of these as well, but from a work point of view also, these are powers that we must cultivate within us. And as educators, in sort of bring to the awareness of future business leaders, future business managers, that life and work should be seen as steps or means for constant progress on all domains. So the future requires a complete integral human being who has the wisdom, who has the knowledge, who has the strength, who is able to create harmony, and who is able to do perfect, detailed work. So with that, I will pause here and I thank you all for your patient listening. And I hope some of this maybe I don't know, insightful or encouraging for some of you. So thank you so much.